Assalamu alaikum and peace be with all of you. Remember this word, peace. Indeed, it is the theme of my brief words in my brief time with you today. Last night, I had the honor of sharing a meal with Justice Tassaduq Jillani, his son, Attorney Tassaduq Jillani, and a long table surrounded by Muslims and Jews and Christians and others. There were laughs, there was joy. The warmth of that evening reminded me of a powerful truth that was articulated by Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who made a distinction between negative peace and positive peace. Dr. King said negative peace was the mere absence of conflict, and positive peace was the presence of justice. And Justice Jillani is widely known for his sacrifices and his dedication to justice. He carries a sense of peace born with him, and I believe is from his life's work of pursuing fairness, dignity, and justice for all. Let us all be reminded that peace flows naturally when justice is actively sought and upheld. The Quran beautifully emphasizes this connection by saying, "O you who believe, stand firmly for God and be witnesses to justice. And do not let your hatred for another people or another's people hatred for you prevent you from being just. Be just. That is closer to righteousness. And be extremely mindful of your responsibility and your relationship with God. For sure, God is well acquainted with everything you do." This is in the 5th chapter, the 8th verse. Tonight we gather to honor the heavy responsibilities that judges bear in protecting the rule of law, by which a society can taste the sweetness of justice and peace. I pray that we can work together, not just to avoid conflict, but let's work together to actively and courageously establish justice. If we strive together towards justice, we create the conditions in which true peace, dignity, and harmony can thrive. May this gathering and our determination strengthen our institutions and guide us all to what is good in this life and the next. Peace be with all of you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Dr. Salaam. It is fitting to begin this evening with a reminder of the higher ideals that we share as citizens of a global community. I'm so pleased to welcome all of you to Duke University to celebrate the life and legacy of Chief Justice Tassaduq Hussain Jillani, the 2025 recipient of the Carl and Susan Bolch Prize for the Rule of Law. It is wonderful to see so many faculty, students, alumni, and leaders from across our university and community here this evening. I'm also pleased to welcome several members of our state and federal judiciaries, including Justice Anita Earls of the North Carolina Supreme Court. And I'm particularly delighted to welcome Justice Jillani's friends and family, including his sons, Saqib, Ali, and Adèle. This full, diverse room is a testament to the broad legacy and impact of Justice Jillani's life and career, and we are grateful that all of you have joined us tonight. The Bolch Prize for the Rule of Law was created by Carl Bolch Jr., a 1967 graduate of Duke Law School, and his wife, Susan Bass Bolch, a graduate of Georgetown University Law Center, who established the Bolch Judicial Institute with a generous gift to Duke Law School in 2018. We are honored to have Susan Bolch here with us tonight. Carl and Susan charged the Institute with a specific mission to better the human condition by studying and promoting the rule of law. This mission has inspired an array of educational programs, scholarly endeavors, and the creation of this prize, all of which aim to strengthen and support the judiciary and judicial systems here and around the world. Justice Jillani is exactly the sort of person we had in mind when this prize was created. His tenure as a judge was defined by a steadfast commitment to the rule of law and his nation's constitution. This was not an abstract commitment. When he and his judicial colleagues were ordered to swear an oath to a military dictator rather than the Constitution, Justice Jillani refused. And throughout his tenure as a judge and Justice of the High Court and Supreme Court, he wrote opinions and judgments that advanced human rights, religious pluralism, gender equity, and modernization, even when those decisions defied political pressure, social traditions, and public opinion. In one groundbreaking opinion denouncing honor killings, a tradition that turned a blind eye to the murder of disgraced family members, he wrote, "No tradition is sacred, no convention is indispensable, and no precedent worth emulating if it does not stand the test of the fundamentals of a civil society generally expressed through law and the Constitution." We will hear more about Justice Jillani's remarkable life and career from our distinguished speakers this evening. First, Taiyyaba Qureshi is the founding president of the North Carolina Muslim Bar Association. She practices immigration law in Raleigh, North Carolina. Next, Justice Adèle Kent is a retired judge of the Court of King's Bench of Alberta, Canada, and president of the Board of Executives of the International Organization for Judicial Training. She has worked with judges around the world to design programs that improve court administration and advance gender equality and judicial ethics. William H. Neukom is co-founder and CEO of the World Justice Project, an organization devoted to promoting the rule of law globally, and for which Justice Jillani serves as an honorary chair. Mr. Neukom is also a retired partner in the Seattle office of the international law firm K&L Gates. After Mr. Neukom's remarks, we will hear from Judge Paul W. Grimm, the David F. Levy Professor of the Practice of Law and Judicial Studies, and Director of the Bolch Judicial Institute, and a retired judge of the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland. Judge Grimm will present the Bolch Prize to Justice Jillani, who will then offer our keynote address. Susan Batts Bolch, co-founder of the Bolch Judicial Institute, will conclude the program. Before we begin, please make sure your cell phones are muted and refrain from taking videos or photos. As noted in your program, a recording and photos from tonight will be available on our website. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Dean, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Taiyyaba Qureshi. I am the founding president of the North Carolina Muslim Bar Association. And we have with us in our delegation tonight our current president, Mr. Nigel Edwards, several students and judges and practicing attorneys. And we appreciate that all of you all came here tonight to honor Justice Jillani and to meet Mr. Saqib Jillani. And truly, Justice, you honor us tonight with your presence and your leadership, and we appreciate you. So we created this organization in 2020 to foster the growing base of Muslim legal professionals in North Carolina. And as we support each other in this, we find that our faith and our cultural practices guide us and enrich us as we practice law. As Muslims, many of us are called to this profession by the justice-oriented teachings of our faith. And I'm going to tell you a verse from the Quran which will sound suspiciously like the one Dr. Salaam said, but it's not the same because the theme is consistent all the way through. So I will speak about chapter 4, verse 135, which also calls those who call themselves believers to stand firm as a witness for justice, even if it means speaking against your own interest or those who are close to you, those who you hold dear. And it reminds us that whether people are rich or poor, that we should know that despite what we do, God will protect and ensure justice for them. And also that if we refuse to stand for the truth, that God is all aware of our actions or lack thereof. And our Prophet Muhammad taught us that the best struggle in the way of God is to speak a word of truth to an unjust ruler. And that message is what I found particularly compelling when I was a young law student at UNC of Muslim and Pakistani heritage. And this was in 2007. I was learning to be a lawyer while watching Justice Jillani and his colleagues on the court face this constitutional crisis against General Pervez Musharraf as he took the presidency and then launched his assault on judicial independence. And as I published my journal article, State of Emergency, and I must confess, at the risk of my alma mater disowning me, that Duke Law's library was much more helpful than UNC Law's library. I was just amazed to watch it happen in real time and study Justice Jillani's bravery and leadership when he refused at great cost to his position on the court to swear loyalty to the authoritarian president and refused to uphold his orders, which were aimed at dismantling all accountability for his actions. Justice Jillani is the true paradigm of a Muslim lawyer. In times of great crisis, he stood firm for justice, even if it meant sacrificing his position on the court, his career, and even his own personal safety. And he continued in his legal practice to be guided by his faith to seek justice for all. He's an example to all of us on how to uphold justice and speak truth, especially when it's hard, especially when it's dangerous, and especially when an executive gathers together and flaunts its power, breaks down the rule of law, and demands that we accept it as the new normal. Justice Jillani, you continue to highlight the best of our faith and our culture. We are honored to be here to learn from you and celebrate you, and we pray for your continued health and success as you continue to stand firm. Thank you.
Good evening. Let me begin by thanking the Bolch Judicial Institute and the Duke Law School for this wonderful opportunity to visit Duke, to meet Justice Jillani, and also the scholars, students, and professors who are part of this wonderful event. Chief Justice Jillani, congratulations on your award, and thank you very much for your bravery and leadership in your country, providing courage and hope that the judiciary can resist attacks upon its independence and impartiality. I know you know this, Chief Justice, but we can never remind ourselves too often. A strong, independent, well-educated, ethical judiciary is ultimately for the protection of the citizens of our countries. I've been asked to speak for a few minutes about judicial independence from a global perspective. Let me start with the words of a wise woman from my country, singer and songwriter Joni Mitchell. She sang, "You don't know what you've got till it's gone." And she was talking about taxis and relationships and parking lots, but it applies as much to judicial independence. My thesis today is that there is no country in the world where judicial independence is not under attack in some form, and that the judges alone have the responsibility to protect and foster a strong, independent judiciary. If we do not, it will be gone. My plan is not to talk a lot about what judicial independence means or its history. I think we all know that. But let's deal with a couple of points just so that we're all on the same page. First, what is judicial independence? It's two things. First, it's the ability of individual judges to make decisions in discrete cases free from external interference or influence. And second, and sometimes in some countries a little more controversial, is that judges, as again independent from outside influence, protect the country's constitution and its fundamental values, just as we heard from Chief Justice Jillani earlier today. The second quick point I want to make is that judges have traditionally relied on lawyers to help, if not lead, the battle to protect judicial independence and defend judges from unwarranted attacks. right now, I'm not sure we can assume that lawyers will have our back. Lawyers have their own issues. The best way I can decide it without getting into all the issues that exist in the various countries, and the issues are different depending on the countries, is that they're going through a bit of an identity crisis. It's happening in my country and elsewhere. Whatever is going on, the judiciary cannot presume that lawyers will be forceful advocates for an independent judiciary. We essentially are on our own. So the question is, what do we do? I want to give you 3 examples of what I've seen in my work around the world and in my home where judicial independence has been at risk or could be at risk. The first thing we need to think about is that we as judges have to conduct ourselves properly, or fundamentally we will lose the confidence of the public. Judges individually must strive to act with the highest ethical standards. Now, this should be easy in countries like Canada, the United States, where the judiciary as an institution is well funded and reasonably free from immediate threat. I say that, however, knowing that we have judges that bully from the bench, apply inappropriate stereotypes, and are not diligent. Fortunately, the cases are few. However, that's not the case everywhere. Judges from around the world, Canada, the United States, Britain, and the European Union have been working for years in Ukraine. When Ukraine became independent from Russia in 1991, there was a rush to build strong democratic institutions so that it could resist the kind of backslide that we have seen in other previous satellites of the Soviet Union. One of the real problems was the corruption amongst the judiciary, so the behavior of the judges themselves. It was widely known amongst Ukrainians, and there was little faith that judges would act fairly and impartially. The fact that the public knew and demanded judges who were impartial and not corrupt is itself an important point. The public was leading. Education, lustration, improving the salaries and working conditions of judges, and so on, all the markers of institutional strengthening that you need for an independent judiciary were starting to fall into place in Ukraine, albeit slowly and sometimes with setbacks. Then the pandemic intervened, making it more difficult, but not impossible, to continue the work. And it did continue with force. Just before the pandemic occurred, on my last trip to Kyiv, you could see the progress being made, not only in talking to the judges who felt more strong and confident in their jobs, but also with the public, seeing the confidence that was being built in the judiciary. Although we are all anxious about what may happen to Ukraine in the next few weeks and months, my point for today is that we as judges need to ensure that we conduct ourselves with impeccable ethics so that we continue to engender confidence from the citizens that we serve. My second and third points are somewhat variations on the same theme. Judges need to speak out. Now, I appreciate, depending on the jurisdiction you're in, this is more or less controversial. But let me start with what happened in Poland in 2015. It's not a situation where I was personally involved and have personal knowledge, but I followed it then and have continued with interest and with relief. For those who may not know, in 2015, Poland had elected a right-wing populist party. As the government began to attack the rule of law by unconstitutionally appointing judges and interfering in the orderly operation of the judicial system, what did the judges do? The judges, along with lawyers and prosecutors, translated what has always been a hard concept to grasp, a hard concept to talk to the public about, the rule of law, judicial independence. But they translated that into what it meant to the lives of everyday Polish citizens. They traveled around the country to the towns and villages and brought the concept to their lives. It took time, but it had an effect. Now here's where it gets tricky. Let me explain by what a Polish professor, Aleksandra Glazinska-Grabius, said in a recent interview with the New York Times, where she described the movement in Poland. The most important aspect of it was changing people's minds as to how to vote in the next elections, even though none of the judges or none of the prosecutors were telling the people they met who to vote for. Absolutely not. They were just saying what are the values and the laws that are endangered by the current actions of the government. So this is where, as I say, it gets tricky. We need to be careful as judges, and that can be hard. We cannot be seen to be interfering with the political process. On the other hand, we cannot be timid. When the task is to put right misinformation or the failure of other branches of government to support the judiciary, the job of speaking out, in my view, rests with the chief justices or court presidents. They are the ones who have the authority and the duty to say something. I think of my chief justice, both the chief of my court, the chief of other federal courts across Canada, the Chief Justice of Canada, the former Chief Justice of Pakistan, Justice Jillani. In our case in Canada, the federal government had been slow in appointing judges. There was nothing malevolent, there was nothing they were trying to prove in what they were doing. It was just not high on their agenda. But it was having an effect on the operation of the courts. Serious criminal charges were being stayed because cases could not be prosecuted within a reasonable period of time. And of course, that's when it made headlines. So here is one of the headlines from the CBC, our public broadcaster, in 2023, and I quote, "Supreme Court Chief Justice slams Liberal government over slow judicial appointment process." And I think the verb slam was not inappropriate for the speech that the Chief Justice had made. So the chiefs were relentless in speaking out not only to politicians, but to Canadians through the newspapers, television, radio, and so on. And it worked. The vacancy rate went from about 10% in 2023 to less than 1% right now. I said the third point was a variation on my second. Although it is the work of chief justices who need to lead when issues of judicial independence become controversial, puny judges, everyday judges, too have an obligation to speak to the public. First, write plainly so the public can understand our reasons. Second, engage with the community, talking about the concepts of rule of law and judicial independence in an understandable way. And to do that, the love of my life education, we need to educate judges on how they can communicate forcefully, plainly, and carefully, remembering our role in a democracy, but also in an effective way. So let me finish with the words of another wise Canadian woman, a courageous woman, former Chief Justice Beverley McLachlin, who spoke often and forcefully about the importance of an independent judiciary. She said, "Judicial independence, as its history attests, has not been won by fiat or accident. It has been won by the vigilance and courage of lawyers and judges over the century. We congratulate ourselves on our judicial independence, yet we would be foolish to take it for granted. Just as judicial independence has been won by long struggle, so it is by struggle that it will be carried forward into the future." Thank you.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here, to bear witness to the career of a good friend. As you have heard, following his distinguished career as an advocate and a judge, Justice Tassaduq Hussain Jillani was elevated to the high bench in 2004. Within all too few years, the general masquerading as a president, one could say, in Pakistan, decided to declare a state of emergency, essentially martial law. And the purpose of that, among others, was to make sure that he could control the judiciary in his country. Well, Justice Jillani was having none of that, to say the least. And he refused to participate in that administration and stepped away from the bench until that administration failed, as it was destined to do. In a bold act of solidarity, with all due respect to the judge, the justice, it was the lawyers in Pakistan who went into the streets because they would not stand for the incarceration of judges. Musharraf was literally putting judges under house arrest if they didn't agree with his ideology and do his bidding. And it was the lawyers who put their dark suits on, their white shirts, their black ties, identifying themselves as supporters of the judiciary and exposing themselves to house arrest or worse. Imagine that. That unity, that solidarity spread around the world. There were protests by lawyers. There were demonstrations by lawyers in many, many cities, in many, many countries. In this country, the ABA, normally not a very activist organization, but proclaiming itself to be the voice of the profession in this country, organized a march. In Washington, D.C., hundreds and hundreds of lawyers from all over the country showed up. And the point was made. That was a chance for this bar to take more seriously its role in a constitutional government. In 2008, recognizing the courage and the principled behavior of the judges in Pakistan who had stood up to Mubarak, awarded those judges a special recognition. And Justice Jillani came to the ABA to receive that award on behalf of his fellow judges and justices. In accepting that award, he said the following, among other things. Quote, "The judicial conscience, the rise of a vibrant bar, a vigilant civil society, and the emergence of an independent media would ultimately lead to the establishment of a constitutional democracy, stable political institutions, and an expanded enforcement of the rule of law." In the following years, and especially during his term as the Chief Justice of the Highest Court of Pakistan, he displayed this quite remarkable and rare combination of intellect, discipline, and a willingness to take on the most contentious and important issues of the day from his bench. By means of his mastery of constitutional law in Pakistan and his powers of persuasion, he led his colleagues to clarify and reinforce notions like freedom of religion for minority folks. And that was probably the most famous decision in the annals of that court. That was their Brown versus Board of Education, if you will. The court went on to, again under his leadership and prodding, recognize gender equality, not a common concept at the time, and the right of a woman to choose her spouse. The right to an education for all Pakistanis. Pakistanis came from the Jillani court. All of those constitutional renderings in a evolving constitutional ecosystem in Pakistan. trail-breaking stuff. In further recognition of his exceptional leadership in the advancement of the rule of law, the ABA awarded Chief Justice Jillani one of its very highest recognitions, its International Human Rights Award, at the annual meeting in Denver in August of 2023. As a seminal figure, which he is, in the global landscape of the rule of law, and in particular for his courageous insistence on the independence of the judiciary and his articulation of human rights, it's only natural that the Bolch Judicial Institute would recognize him and bring him forward. The rule of law is a capacious concept. One definition says it's made up of 4 essential elements, if you will. Accountability of all private and public actors. There was accountability in apartheid South Africa and in the Third Reich. So the accountability has to come under a set of universally just laws featuring human rights. Check the box for Justice Jillani. Due process. Some form of contract and property rights. And a whole slew of those rights that fall under international human rights. The best place to look for that probably is the International Bill of Human Rights, which includes, of course, the Universal Declaration, Eleanor Roosevelt's masterpiece. The rule of law as a second element a third element has to include open government. This court, I don't think it did anything behind closed doors. And finally, to get to today's theme, if you will, and the brilliance of the charge from the Bolches, it has to involve some manner of accessible justice. And that justice has to be impartial. On a personal, and I pause to reflect on the genius of the charge to the center. It's a judicial center, but it is charged to advance the rule of law. And we have an example of someone who has outperformed in each of those elements, if you will. Accountability, just laws, open government, accessible, impartial justice in some form. On a personal note, if I may, one of the striking features of this honoree is that you would think that an esteemed jurist, recognized throughout the world for his courage and his jurisprudential insights, might feel a bit privileged or entitled. This is not Justice Jillani. He has an enviable sense of humility about his work and his life. When we founded the World Justice Project in 2007, much inspired by his heroic deeds in Pakistan, we made a priority of a thing called a global forum. We hold that every other year, bring people together from all around the world, and the point is to learn together about the rule of law. What does it mean? Why is it important? What can we do about it? And Justice Jillani, at considerable expense and imposition, has traveled long distances to meet with us at many of those. Sometimes as a presenter, we want his wisdom. Sometimes just in the audience. He's perfectly content to be in a group, learning and teaching. On a lighter note, that anthem. The anthem is in your programs, I think. And I couldn't help but think about Fred Astaire. Not many of you in this audience are old enough to know who Fred Astaire is, unless you watch Turner Classic Movies. But accept the proposition that Fred Astaire was perhaps the greatest dancer in the history of Hollywood. Some would say Gene, what's his name, but I would say Fred Astaire. His partner was better because she did it backwards and in high heels, of course. But for male dancers, he set the standard. A remarkably talented guy in dozens of movies. As a young actor, he went for a screen test. And the review was this: cannot sing, cannot act, dances a little. Justice Jillani, at a screen test, would be saying, he can advocate, he can adjudicate, and he could do a little songwriting. Justice Jillani, thank you.
Good evening and welcome. Each year, the Carl and Susan Bolch Prize for the Rule of Law is awarded to an individual or an organization that has demonstrated extraordinary dedication to the rule of law and advancing the rule of law principles around the world. Through this prize, we draw attention to the hard work that must be done to protect and fortify the constitutional structures and safeguards that undergird a free society. This is the mission of the Bolch Judicial Institute: to strengthen and support the rule of law, to defend judicial independence, and to study ways to improve the law in our courts, not for abstract purposes, but to better the human condition. The Institute builds on Duke Law School's strong and long-standing ties to the judiciary and the work of our extraordinary faculty. Our work is both scholarly, but also practical. And it's an example of how we at Duke can make a difference by bringing together the generosity and vision of philanthropists like Carl and Susan, the curiosity and interest of our faculty and students, and the leadership of people who, like you, help bring the academy and the real world together to achieve meaningful and lasting effects. The recipients of the Bolch Prize reflect the same creativity and commitment to improving society through the rule of law. Associate Justice Anthony M. Kennedy was the recipient of the first Bolch Prize in 2019. And if you look in your program, you'll see that he was followed by a list of distinguished recipients ever since then. But today, it's our great pleasure and honor to add Chief Justice Tassaduq Hussain Jillani to that distinguished list. As you have heard, Justice Jillani is especially deserving to be the recipient of the Bolch Prize this year. As we've heard this evening, he has demonstrated extraordinary commitment to judicial independence and remarkable courage for standing up for the rule of law, even when it meant defying an unconstitutional order from a president, even when it meant that he would lose his job. Equally impressive is the courage, wisdom, and vision Justice Jillani demonstrated in his judicial opinions. They protected civil liberties and fundamental rights, especially for women and religious minorities. And he laid the foundation for a new era of constitutional jurisprudence that established the Supreme Court of Pakistan as the guardian of values of justice and individual liberty, and engaged the bar and the public in both supporting and protecting those values. Justice Jillani offers an important example to all of us and to so many judges and lawyers here and around the world who face growing challenges to judicial independence, attacks against judges, and the legal profession. He has shown how judges, through fidelity to the law and dedication to fundamental human rights and liberties, can gain the trust of the people, and therefore the authority needed to act as a bulwark against government abuse of power. It is with immense pride and pleasure that I present to Justice Jillani the 2025 Carl and Susan Bolch Prize for the Rule of Law. Justice Jillani, can I escort you over here? All right, I think we have to pose for the photograph. All right.
Honorable Paul Grimm, Bill Neukom, Imam, Taiyyaba Qureshi, Susan Bolch, ladies and gentlemen, I am really honored to be here. I am grateful to all the speakers who have preceded me for their kind words, and I am grateful to the Bolch Institute for finding me deserving to receive this award. To me, this award symbolizes our shared values of democracy, of freedom, of the rule of law, of human dignity, of religious freedom and tolerance, values which are under severe threat today. And whereas faith has been a profound force in human history for good, we also see it claiming monopoly of truth in a world of competing claims. Such competing claims have at times seen humanity at its worst. We saw opening of a new chapter of human tragedy in October 2003 in Palestine. We saw genocide in Gaza. We see a new kind of Holocaust being reenacted where only victims are different. We see murder of minorities in Syria, the murder of Muslims and Christians in Nigeria. We see religious war in Central African Republic. We see Muslims and Christians, minorities, being subjected to violence in certain parts of India. We see a tide of anti-Semitism and hate crimes in Europe, often perpetrated in the name of religion. We see this extremism in varying degrees in almost all parts of the world. Historically, extremism and rule of law have been ill-wedded companions. In 1645, the Bishop of London was tried on terrorism charges, and the allegation was that he wanted to blow up the Parliament House because that year the Protestants had gained majority in the Parliament. He was tried and convicted and hanged. Little he did know that no God condemns terror, no grievance justifies killing innocent people. Rather, all faiths ordain that we should treat one another as we wish to be treated. This is the message of the Holy Prophet, Holy Torah. This was ordained by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and this is the message from Holy Bible as well. In modern democracies, it falls to the judiciary to play a more proactive role in enforcing the constitutional mandate, in defending the people's fundamental rights of equality, freedom, and justice for all. The US Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education abolished segregation in schools and ensured implementation of its judgment by dispatching federal troops in the concerned states. The US Supreme Court came a long way from its earlier decision in the case of Dred Scott versus Stanford, 1857, wherein a colored person was refused status of a citizen. And ladies and gentlemen, as some of you would know, my nation has been and is still at war against a far-reaching network of violence, extremism, and hatred. We are confronted at times with visible and invisible enemies. It was in the midst of this war that a church in Peshawar, a city of Pakistan,
was made the target of a bomb blast during which 81 Christians died while they were praying and many were injured. Months passed, but neither the culprits were brought to book nor the victims got any compensation. This prompted me as Chief Justice of Pakistan to take suo motu notice of this incident and also of a news report where a Kalash tribe in northern Pakistan alleged that they were being forced to change their faith and embrace Islam, failing which they would be subjected to violence or death. I issued notices to the concerned state functionaries and representatives of various religious and ethnic groups in Pakistan. After detailed hearings, I rendered a judgment which starts with an inspirational quote from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which is, as I quote, "All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over black, except by piety and good conduct," unquote. The court held that the religion cannot be defined in rigid terms and that freedom of religion is a comprehensive term which includes freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and freedom of belief and faith. The court went on to add that the right to religious freedom granted in terms of Article 20 of the Pakistan Constitution is available to each citizen and is multidimensional. It is right to profess, it is right to practice or propagate his or her religious views against the prevailing or dominant views of his or her own religious denomination or sect. In a country where human rights have constitutional mandate, such violence was an aberration and was symptomatic of a deeper malady. It reflected an education deficit and religious illiteracy. The court in such situations, besides enforcing the law, has a pedagogical role to disseminate the constitutional values, in particular tolerance, rule of law, and democracy. I took suo motu notice because I was of the view that minorities in Pakistan, as in several transitional democracies, are a vulnerable section of society because of their social and economic limitations. The Supreme Court in a democracy has to protect people's constitutional rights, liberal institutions, and values. Any declaration made and the principle of law laid by the Supreme Court have a trickle-down effect on other institutions of the state. The court gave 7 directions to the state, which included the creation of a task force to promote religious tolerance, to provide for appropriate curricula in schools and colleges consistent with constitutional values, the elimination of hate speech from social media, the creation of a Council of Minority Rights, and a special force to protect the places of worship of minorities. These directions were all geared towards sensitizing the Muslim majority and for promoting liberal institutions without which democracy remains dysfunctional. The anthem of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, which was authored by me, titled as Justice for All, was made part of the judgment for 2 reasons. Firstly, because it's a constant reminder of the vision of the founder of the country, that the ideals which reverberated the movement for the creation of Pakistan. Secondly, the anthem cautioned the nation that if those values which went to the making of the country were not lived by, the nation would bear a heavy cost. The anthem is perched along with its mosaic rendering on the full wall beside the entrance gate of the Supreme Court. An abbreviated version of the anthem reads as follows: Justice for all, the toil, the sweat, the tears and the blood, make up the labor for the land begot. Long live the message, the lamp and the rays that grow the temple, which holds the scales, pinning the dream, the hopes and oath of justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important to, however, to remember that judiciary alone may not be sufficient to create a society where rights are respected and where there is tolerance and where believers of every faith are free to live by their respective belief. Each one of us has a role to play. In a democracy, there is one office that you share with the rest, irrespective of your choice of career, your vocation, your religion, or sectarian or ethnic affiliation. This is the office of a citizen. As a citizen, you are equal whatever position you may hold: a teacher, a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, an agriculturist, an industrialist, a father, a mother, a son, or a daughter. In the promotion of the values of pluralistic society, where the rights of all communities are respected, each one of you has a role to play as a citizen. Countries have witnessed persecution, tyranny, and intolerance only because the citizens did not play this role, leaving the demagogues, the fundamentalists, and the religious zealots to have their way. Before I part, I may add that I have been deeply moved by the vision reflected in the Bolch Prize for the Rule of Law. It is indeed in accord with the best elements of your nation's moral ethos. Democracies around the world would immensely benefit from each such initiatives. Your law school is tasked with producing leaders in the public domain who can, besides promoting the rule of law, be catalysts for social change. By their thoughts and with their actions, they can influence the course of events both nationally and internationally. Your country today is at the pinnacle of its soft and hard power. It's an awesome power, an awesome challenge, and an awesome opportunity. That being so, it should espouse and promote only those causes and values which it has lived by. This would inspire greater credibility and would strengthen your country's claim of moral leadership. You have a proud legacy of wrestling independence through blood and sweat by holding certain truths to be self-evident, of risking civil war to secure human rights, of judicial independence, laying down Marbury versus Madison, of authoring the Universal Declaration of Human Rights after the First World War, of leading the free world in the reconstruction of Europe, and then of self-accountability demonstrated in the rise and fall of McCarthyism. You have Dr. Martin Luther King and his inspirational dream. You have John F. Kennedy and his vision of the world. And finally, you can rightly take pride in having produced some of the greatest philanthropists known in human history. For centuries, the Statue of Liberty, perched on the New York harbor, has been a symbol of welcome, of hope, of openness, and of freedom and liberty for the people around the world. Why with this glorious track record? I saw in The Economist magazine some time back the image of a tired and worried Lady Liberty sitting on a broken podium with the torch of liberty lying on its feet. Why does it talk of an unhappy America? Why did Fareed Zakaria speak of the post-American world? Why is America facing a crisis having moral overtones in some of the issues in the realm of international politics? These are some of the questions. I will leave it to you to think and respond. But you have a role to play, because in the past, some of the illustrious members of your profession have provided inspiring and transformative leadership to the American people. Destiny beckons you to relive those moments and follow the shining stars of honor, dignity, and idealism which adorn your heritage. And maybe in moments of moral ecstasy, you may like to remind yourself of your founding father's advice to the nation, carried in his farewell address as president. It has a strong message, it's inspirational, it's prophetic. Washington said, and I quote, "Observe good faith and justice towards all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Religion and morality enjoin this conduct, and can it be that the good policy does not equally enjoin it? It will be worthy of a free, enlightened, and at no distant period, a great nation to give to mankind the magnanimous and too novel example of a people always guided by exalted justice and benevolence," unquote. This is what your founding father said. With this message and hope, I take your leave. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Susan Bass Bolch, and I am so proud to be with you tonight to celebrate Chief Justice Jillani and his lifelong commitment to the rule of law. My husband, Carl Bolch Jr., and I created the Bolch Judicial Institute to support and elevate efforts to study, protect, and advance the rule of law here in the United States and around the world. Through the Bolch Prize for the Rule of Law, we shine a light on those who dedicate their lives to protecting and strengthening the rule of law. Chief Justice Jillani, it is our privilege to honor you tonight. You have shown tremendous leadership and courage in standing up for judicial independence. And through your jurisprudence, you have modeled for the world a path for protecting civil liberties and religious freedom for all people. We are so grateful to you for sharing your life and your wisdom with us this evening, and for all you have done to advance the rule of law in Pakistan and around the globe. My hope is that each of us will leave this evening inspired and determined to stand up for the rule of law and to work together to protect the ideals that undergird our democracy, because without the rule of law, there can be no democracy. Now, I invite all of you to join us in the atrium for a reception and an opportunity to view the galleries in this beautiful museum. Thank you so much for being here tonight.